In today's video, we have lots of NHL news and rumors to take a look at. On the rumors section, could we see the Habs and the St. Louis Blues pull off a big trade involving two top prospects? Plus, we have some other trade talk around the New York Islanders, the Winnipeg Jets, the latest on Patrik Laine. Plus, we have some other news around the league, including several signings, big news out of New Jersey, several front office moves, news out of Utah, and we get a lot more of the story of what happened in Sportsnet and Jeff Marek. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to talk about here today. All kinds of news, some trade talk, some signings. We got a bit of everything here. So let's dive in and get started. First, let's start with the signing news. Nothing too substantial, but lots of moves here. A lot of players leaving the NHL to head back over to Russia as well. Starting with the Los Angeles Kings, signing young defenseman Jordan Spence. He gets a 2-year contract extension of $1.5 million. That's a pretty good deal, especially for the team, I think, for what Spence brings. I think long-term with their cap situation, just kind of makes sense not to go too long and too much right now, but I do think there's a potential there for Spence to certainly increase his role and value within the team. And this bridge deal will give him a good opportunity to continue to do that. Another signing in the NHL, the Sharks have continued to sign their prospects. They've signed another member of the 24 draft class, the 33rd overall pick, left winger Igor Chernyshov. He comes over from Russia and signs his 3-year entry-level contract. I mentioned lots of other news as well for players that have played in the NHL signing overseas. The KHL announced a flurry of signings today, including some of the names that we've kind of already mentioned that were heading over there before. We just didn't know the exact terms, but Alexander Barabanov, former Leaf and Shark, has signed a 2-year deal in the KHL with AK Bars. Denis Gurianov signs a 2-year contract with CSKA. Former Flame, or current RFA with the Flames, actually, they still hold his rights. Defenseman Nikita Kodiok, he gets a 2-year contract, also with CSKA. Former Predator now, Igor Afanaseyev, he gets a 3-year contract, also with CSKA. And former Penn and I believe Oiler as well, Dmitry Samorukov, he gets a 3-year contract, also with CSKA. And we already had talked about the fact that former Islander prospect, well, I guess, again, they still hold his rights, but not with the team anymore. Ruslan Ishikov, he also, we knew he was going over. He signs a 2-year deal, also with the same team. So it was a slew of players going to CSKA there formerly that played in the NHL. Lots of guys there that tried it, didn't work out, and have head back. I mean, Gurianov was probably the longest serving NHL player out of all those guys, but certainly no big surprise on that front. Some other news around the NHL. The Edmonton Oilers today announced the latest additions to their team Hall of Fame, and that's going to be a longtime player and executive Craig McTavish, along with Randy Gregg. Both were a member of the Oilers Stanley Cup championship teams and done other things with the organization. So they will both be inducted into the Edmonton Oilers Hall of Fame this coming season. We got news out of New Jersey today as well. They've announced a bunch of moves in their front office. They've hired Chuck Fletcher, of course, the former general manager, has had gigs with the Minnesota Wild and Philadelphia Flyers in that role. He's not going to be GM, of course. They have Tom Fitzgerald, but Fitzgerald has hired Fletcher to be a senior advisor within the hockey operations department. They've also hired former team captain Andy Green. He comes back to the organization to work as an advisor in hockey operations. Manny Legacy, former NHL goalie, longtime goalie coach who's worked with a few teams, joins the Devils as the head amateur goalie scout and will also work as a goaltending development coach. So that's another one there. And Jeff Sanderson, of course, Jake Sanderson's dad, Jake of the Ottawa Senators. Jeff Sanderson, a longtime NHL player himself, will join the Devils as a pro scout. And Tom Fitzgerald's son, Ryan Fitzgerald, also joins the club in the scouting department as a college scout. So lots of organizational updates there with the Devils. The Utah Hockey Club continues to work away at making the overall experience there for players and fans better. They announced a pretty big piece of news today, at least in my opinion. I think it's pretty big. They've acquired an 11-acre site called The Shops at Southtown in Sandy, Utah, which will become the new home, a new permanent state-of-the-art for the new practice facility and training center that they're about to build, which is scheduled to be open for the 25 live season. So obviously we knew that, they had a short period of time to get ready for hockey in Utah. It was not going to have everything in the first season, but they had the money and the plans and everything in place to, quickly develop everything they needed to make it very comfortable for the players and make sure that they have all the resources and everything at their fingertips that they need. And they'll have a brand new state-of-the-art facility for training and practicing there, which is great news. We knew that's something that was coming, but the fact that they've acquired the site and can begin working on that project is a tremendous piece of news. Of course, another story that we've been following here for the past few days. Of course, I know personally I got suspicious of something was up early in July, but we didn't get any news. But it was obviously becoming pretty apparent that Jeff Marek and Sportsnet were not a thing anymore, and that Marek had definitely left the network. But he was very quiet. He didn't post anything on his social media. He went radio silent after July 1st, or actually even before that, if I'm not mistaken, after the draft. He was silent. And, with all the free agent stuff happening, and he had nothing to say. I just found it very, very odd. We knew that him and Elliot were supposed to have a 32 Thoughts podcast that would come out post-free agency discussing all the moves that we've seen. That didn't happen. The last 32 Thoughts podcast that we did get was Elliot on his own, which wasn't a complete tip-off that something was up, because if you've followed the Sportsnet network and know the kind of roles that a lot of these guys get at the draft, it's not unusual that where the draft is a 2-day event, that Marek would work the first round on night one, and then the second day he wouldn't be part of the broadcast, and he would usually end up going home. So the fact that Elliot did a 32 Thoughts podcast, mentioned that Jeff Marek caught the red-eye flight home that night and wasn't there to do that episode with them, wasn't overly, at first I was like, wonder what, but then I was like, okay, actually, you know what, that's pretty normal for Jeff. He actually quite often isn't part of the second day coverage. I didn't realize that he would actually head home that quickly, but at the end of the day, didn't seem odd. But then, like I said, several days go by, no social media posts, no more episodes of the podcast. It just seemed bizarre. And then we got word through insiders that back in season 1, was just a few days ago, that he ended up parting ways with the network, but we didn't really know why. There was speculation that something happened at the draft, but we didn't really know what. And now The Athletic has an article from Katie Strang and Dan Robson, the investigative journalists, have kind of dug in and found out kind of what's happened here. So essentially, we know that Sportsnet is the media rights holder of the NHL in Canada. Okay, so obviously how things work with the draft and Marek's role here is he would be the one interviewing for Sportsnet the prospects after they were picked, and he was really good at talking to the players. Really good about, he's such a knowledgeable guy and has all kinds of information. As follows, he used to cover junior hockey more so, and even though it's not been his main area of focus, he still pays very close attention to it, takes in a lot, and he just loves prospects and that aspect of hockey. So he's extremely knowledgeable. He seems to know all the little intricate details, and that's a great role for him. So as the rights holder, one thing a lot of people probably don't realize is that when the NHL general managers are making their selections, when you're watching the draft and you see on the screen the pick is in, then you notice there's obviously a little bit of delay before they get up to announce the pick. That's done intentionally, because now the pick is confirmed to the league, and the league passes that on to its right holders so that they can prepare. They're already ahead of time and have all their graphics made for the screen, stats sheets, all those type of things, so that the camera people can have a chance to be ready to pan to where they're sitting in the audience. All those things to make it for a better broadcast. So clearly, that's something that these guys would know. But it's only 1 or 2 minutes before it gets announced. It's not very long. It's just enough time for the broadcaster to be prepared. So what's been accused here is that Marek was probably through, I'm not sure if it's through texting or through Twitter or what have you, passing that information along to one of his friends, who of course works in the scouting world and has a good Twitter following and was making a lot of social media posts about who he thought the picks were going to be and all that type of thing. Really, and so somebody at the NHL got tipped off that, this probably by seeing the social media posts and knowing the friendship and knowing the relationship, that maybe Marek might have been passing the information along. That's not been confirmed. However, there is the Las Vegas Gaming Commission. Of course, in Vegas, lots of rules because of the fact of they're in, the gambling capital of the U.S. And essentially, somebody at the NHL got suspicious of it, had a conversation with him before he left after night one of the draft, brought it to Sportsnet's attention, and then now, after everything, to me, it seems like a huge overreaction. And they've mutually agreed to part ways. It's believed that Jeff, once they met with him after he got back home, and obviously come to this conclusion that they had him sign something that he probably wasn't going to be allowed to talk about it publicly. So essentially, when it comes to why would this information be, because he's an insider, and NHL insiders and sports insiders across all the major sports leak stuff all the time. Why is this information any more special? Got him in trouble? Is this going to stop insiders from doing their jobs properly? Why is this such a big thing? And it's mainly because they were in Vegas and because of the Vegas Gaming Commission. But it's not like he was profiting from this information being shared, nor was his friend. The betting sites were required to have bets be closed off or first round, anything that you can bet on for that first round of the draft 24 hours ahead. So, you couldn't have an option to place a bet 1 or 2 minutes if you had that information with enough time to benefit from it. So there's no financial gain here. It has nothing to do with betting. But the fact that this is something that he's believed to have done for a long time. If you watch other pro sports, they're insiders, like the NBA, Adrian Wojnarowski or whatever, I think Woj is his name. I don't follow the NBA closely, so I probably said his name wrong, but he's leaked stuff before, and nothing's ever came from it. Frank Saravalli leaked the entire expansion draft list before the expansion draft took place. Again, nothing came from it. The problem there, I know in Frank's case, is he didn't work for the rights holder, right? That can play a big role. And in the case of the NBA, its location is a big role. So, in all honesty, I really think what he did is kind of something that is common. It's not unusual. In my opinion, this is a huge overreaction by the league and Sportsnet. I honestly thought that he would eventually, like I said, he had a bright future there. He's been there a long time. Obviously, well-connected, well-trusted guy. One of the most genuine people. You can just tell the number of outpouring support that he received on social media when the news broke was crazy, right? So, so theoretically, this information is not the same thing as that, what insiders, right? So you talk to an executive and they say, well, we know that the Montreal Canadiens are talking to that team about a trade because we were talking, they get inside scoops through different methods, right? That's different. That's not, considered proprietary information of the league. That's something that's going on between teams. You heard from a scoop from an insider or from an executive somewheres or an agent or whoever gave you the info. Completely different story than leaking a trade rumor compared to this is something that the league owns and that information was shared with a third party that doesn't have permission to have that information. So I do understand that why it's considered wrong. I just really don't think if it wasn't for the fact that they were in Vegas and the Las Vegas Gaming Commission being involved and kind of making a fuss, that this wouldn't have had the outcome that it did. And it probably would have been more of a case that they spoke to him. Maybe he gets in trouble, but he doesn't lose his job. Just seems like to be a crazy overreaction. Like I said, he's going to land on his feet somewhere. Another network is going to give him an opportunity, or he's going to create something on his own. I don't know if he goes like the Frank Saravalli route to with like a site or outlet like Daily Faceoff and something like that, where he's a little bit more independent. Does he go to TSN? I don't know where he goes, but he's a terrific broadcaster, extremely knowledgeable, very well liked, very well respected. Did he make a mistake? Probably. Is it a big deal? I don't think so. So I think he'll definitely land on his feet and go somewhere, but at least we now have a better idea of what the heck happened and why everything went down the way it did between Sportsnet and Jeff Marek and the sudden silence around everything after night one of the 24 NHL draft. But there is a full article on The Athletic. If you're subscribed to it, certainly make sure you read it. Katie Strang put together a great piece and just kind of explains this thing in great detail. I'll try my best to summarize it for you all, but if you want to read it a little bit more in depth, certainly recommend that you do so. And the rumor mill, some other stuff here that we take a look at. Arthur Staple, the New York Islanders beat writer of The Athletic, is talking about Oliver Wahlstrom. Even though he's recently been signed, Staple believes that he's not going to be on the roster come opening night. That still feels there's a good possibility that they're going to continue to try to find a trade for him, although he does indicate in his most recent piece that trade interest is limited, you could say. There's not, obviously when you get a player of his magnitude that struggled, it's going to be limited. And they don't want to sell too low either, right? But at the same time, if they don't have a roster spot for him, the alternative here is if they can't find a trade, Staple believes there's a decent chance he could end up on waivers. I don't know when they would do that. They would probably have to do it. I don't know if they could do it early, but I don't think there's really much benefit. Probably better off to do it during training camp. He could get picked up. If he doesn't get picked up, he could go to the minors. But one way or another, either they find a trade, put him on waivers and he gets claimed, or they put him on waivers and he doesn't and ends up with Bridgeport. The contract's fully variable if it is something that we see where he clears waivers. So that part is fine. But yeah, it's like Patrick Waugh didn't seem to be a fan of seeing where he fit with the team after he took over. He's kind of got passed by some other players, and especially for bottom six roles because he's not a bottom six player. So you're going to lean more towards your other players like your Fashings and your McLeans and guys that have kind of come up the ranks here recently. So yeah, I think Wahlstrom's time with the Isles is probably done in one way or another. If he does somehow not get traded, end up on waivers and clear, that's kind of what you call rock bottom for the player. If that happens, and you would hope for at that point that he would go to the minors, do well, and then maybe they can find a trade for him once he's down there and showing teams that he can still play. But unlikely to see him on the roster when the season starts. In Winnipeg, there's some rumors about Cole Perfetti. We've talked before about some trades that were discussed around the draft, and at that point, I think if the Jets were able to get themselves a big return, they were willing to consider putting Perfetti in the deal. We talked before about how there was a trade that was, for Marty Necas, where Perfetti and McGroarty were both considered to be part of a package to land the player, and of course it never happened. But right now, it looks like Perfetti is quite content to remain in Winnipeg, which is good, unlike McGroarty, who's, to the best of our knowledge today, nothing's changed. He still wants a trade, but in Perfetti's case, there is some speculation that they are getting closer to getting a contract done, and it sounds like they're even getting towards a longer-term deal. It may not be 8 years, but it sounds like it could be 6 or 7. Hard to say exactly where things land. Could be, maybe 7 years at $5.5 million, maybe it's 6 years at closer to $5 million, something along those lines. But there is belief that that's trending in a good positive direction, and that Shovel Dayoff and the Jets are willing to sign him to a longer term deal and kind of take a bet here that he will continue to get better. And that, if he, to be honest, if I'm the player, I probably don't want to go too long. But at the same time, you've seen how the first couple of years of your career has gone, and maybe you want the security to take it just in case, right? You maybe you don't play that contract, maybe you don't, but at least you have peace of mind to know that you're looked after. So it sounds like that's where things are going in that with that player and that team, and that a trade involving Perfetti at this point is probably pretty unlikely. Patrick Laine is still very much out there in the news. Lots of speculation on Twitter. I know a lot of people are saying that Montreal is the front runner. Again, I don't have enough information to suggest that that's legit. Lots of people on Twitter, or X, I guess, saying that they believe this to be the case, but they're not the top connected insiders that I typically rely on the most for information talking about in these videos. So we can't say with any certainty that that is the case, but there is belief that they're definitely involved and interested, and they're one of the teams out there. I know Don Waddell, the new GM of the Blue Jackets, of course, who would be involved in trading Laine, recently spoke regarding the Carolina Hurricanes changes and kind of gave an endorsement, if you will, for new GM Eric Tulsky as the new GM. Of course, they worked together a long time before Waddell left, and he made a comment, and a lot of people talking, and that they were trying to make a trade right now. So he could have been joking. I mean, Don Waddell's got a pretty dry sense of humor. I'm not really sure that that's 100% true, but Carolina has been one of the teams that have been mentioned around Laine. Like we've heard Pittsburgh, Carolina, Montreal. To some extent, Buffalo's name has been out there a little bit too, and there's at times when the other teams popped in or out. Back to Winnipeg has been something I've heard, but again, it's kind of tricky, right? So, at this point, it's hard to say exactly, but did Don Waddell give us some information there that maybe we'll see? I mean, Carolina definitely could use another top 6 forward. There's no doubt. I just don't know what the offer in the package would be until they get Seth Jarvis signed. It's going to have a better, clearer picture of their cap situation. Waddell had also made comments, I believe, and was it a day or two ago, I was reading one of the Columbus Blue Jackets writers who had quoted Waddell saying that if he was willing to eat 50% of the contract, that he would have traded him by now. So I think the first preference here is a trade with no retention. The only way Carolina has a shot at that is Kotkaniemi has to go as part of the package, and they're going to have to include probably something else too. Now, Don Waddell's belief is that he will take at least one roster player back, maybe more, but it depends on who and what it is. So hard to say, right? But Laine is still very much out there. Some are saying it's getting closer. But again, it's just hard to verify that information because of the sources that are talking about it out there. And could we see a trade with Montreal and St. Louis involving some top prospects? I know I've seen a lot of talk about this on social media too. This information actually originally came from Pierre Maguire. Pierre Maguire, of course, has worked in the NHL with a variety of teams. Most recently in Ottawa a couple of years ago when he worked with Pierre Dorion for a bit before ultimately that relationship soured and then he was let go. But Maguire appears as a regular guest with Tony Marinaro on his Habs-based podcast, and he was the one that floated the idea that, we know that the Montreal Canadiens have been after a top young forward, and maybe that turns out to be Laine, maybe it doesn't. But a name that he mentioned was Jimmy Snuggerud out of St. Louis. He feels that Ken Hughes should target him as a trade piece, and that he feels a defenseman like Logan Mailloux has the potential to be a top pair guy, in that maybe they should offer Mailloux to for Snuggerud in St. Louis. Now, personally, I don't know that the Blues are going to want to move Snuggerud. I think to me, he looks like a really good prospect, unless he gave them the vibe that he wasn't going to sign, which at this point I don't believe is the case. I don't think we have reason to think or say that right now. If it got to that, then sure, I can see why they would do it. But otherwise, to me, he just looks really, really good. He looks like he's going to be a really good goal-scoring winger. So I don't know why they would want to do that. Now, Montreal, I can understand, like I said before, they're going to have to move some more of these young defensemen, right? You saw them sign Barron and Jackeye to 2-year deals. You saw them sign Gooley to a 6-year deal. They've still got Reinbacher and Hudson coming. You get Struble, you get Harris, you get Mailloux. You throw in a few veterans like Matheson and Savard. You can't keep everybody, right? They already moved Jonathan Kovacevic this offseason. And at least one more of these guys, to me, has to go before the season starts. And, he believes, Maguire that is, that Mailloux could be a good right shot top pair D down the road, and that might intrigue a team like the Blues to consider moving off of Snuggerud to acquire him. He had a good year in the AHL last year for Laval. He certainly has potential. There's been some talk wondering if he could challenge for a roster spot this year, which could again force the Habs' hand and make a move amongst that blue line decor amongst the prospect youngsters here over the next number of weeks or beginning of the NHL season. So, we'll see. I don't know. To be honest, from Montreal's perspective, I would do this trade. I really would. I think they have enough defensemen that have a chance to be as good or better than Mailloux. At this point, that's how things look. It's hard to predict, but if they were willing to give me Snuggerud for Mailloux, I would make that trade. No, I don't know. I don't have any reason to think that Doug Armstrong would make that trade, but I think they really like Snuggerud. And I'm sure the Blues would love to get a top right shot defenseman prospect into their system too. But, again, it's hard to say. I don't know that the Blues make that trade. Montreal, I think, does every time. But I think Doug Armstrong says no. But let me know what you think down in the comments, and we'll talk further. Is that something that you think Montreal should pursue? Do you think they have a realistic chance of getting this player? He could be a terrific fit with their young core of forwards there, to be honest. When he comes out of college, I think he's going to be a real good player. So let me know your thoughts on that and everything else discussed here today in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.